Hello and welcome to the show. My name is Sam, and this is The Lonely Chapter, a show where we speak to interesting people, finding out their stories, discovering what motivates them, whilst also learning from their highs and their lows. Today, we are learning from Matt Hosking. He works within Ecology in Ireland, having graduated with a wildlife biology degree. We discuss how he adjusted to life moving countries during his early 20s, how climbing has helped him face his fears and what he's looking forward to working on in the future. Thank you for listening. This one was made for your enjoyment. Matt, starting off today, I'd like to start with ecology. So, a lot of people listening may not know what that is. Can you just start by giving us a brief oversight of that area of work?
Yeah, of course. So ecology at its absolute root is the interaction of everything with everything else in the natural world. So the one you'd learn about in school would be food webs, that kind of thing, but it can just be anything to do with nature, the wilderness, anything natural, and kind of semi-natural these days. Like there's not actual too many true natural areas left in the world. And so, in a working aspect, it would be either research. Research would be like the purest form and probably the most interesting. Like you have those would be the people that like go out and discover species and kind of do correlation studies in, say, the Amazon or the Antarctic or the Arctic. And then you have the bit which I'm currently in, which is the consultancy side, and that's kind of where the modern world and nature are trying to gel.
Hmm.
Um, Obviously, everyone's very hyper aware of the environment now and kind of interested, but you still need special. Like just because you're interested doesn't mean you can. You will inherently know what is good for nature. So, as a consultant, that's where we kind of come in, and like so on projects where people want to do good things for nature. In the UK, you have a lot of like biodiversity net gain stuff.
Hmm.
You kind of just need to know what is good and where. So we will come in, we'll do a survey, we will take down species lists, take down habitats, and if there's anything that stands out that we could maybe help with. So the easiest ones would be bats. Like bats are everywhere. Like you probably don't know it because obviously they're out at night, they're tiny,
Okay.
and we can't hear them without a detector because
Mm.
they're um, obviously so high pitched. And so the easiest things for that is usually just make dark corridors because lighting in urban environments and even rural environments now is so bad. Like it's so bright and so constant. Like the amount of people that leave their lights on when
Yeah.
really unnecessary.
You see that when you're flying over big cities as well from planes, don't you?
Yeah, no, it's outrageous. Like my mum got into astrology clubs, and there's like statistics where it's like 14% of people can see the Milky Way or have seen the Milky Way because
Mm.
we're in like Ireland in the UK, because it's just like you can't, there's not enough darkness to actually allow the light from the Milky Way to come through for you to see it. And
Yeah.
like we're very lucky where my mum lives, it's dark sky reserve, so we can. But yeah, so it's just things like that, like kind of blending the modern world with nature and trying to make them work together. A brilliant example, if you ever look it up, would be like Singapore. Their environmental landscaping is like the forefront of the world. Like they're very famous for their thing, for their kind of building designs and how they incorporate green space.
What sort of stuff do they do?
Well, so they have those famous like waterfalls inside buildings, and then whole buildings that have like it's just garden after garden, like kind of staggered upwards, and then also
Okay.
just incorporated wetlands and yeah, just other kind of habitats into their building design, and they just leave a lot of space for nature.
Mm.
Obviously, very unique habitat down there. It would be completely different in Ireland and UK, but we're
Yeah.
still trying to do our best by incorporating nature, like space for nature, into buildings.
Why is that something that hasn't picked up elsewhere in the world? Do you know why?
Um, that's kind of a luxury, to be honest. like the island, well, Europe and say a country like Singapore. Like Singapore is very wealthy at the upper end of their society. Obviously, severe poverty as well. But the money that the government can use to make these projects is there to be done, and then so the interest and the money. Whereas, yeah, Europe is one of the richest places in the world. Ireland is one of the growing economies in the world, so there's a lot more money available to be
Yeah.
doing this kind of stuff. And yeah, most of our nature in UK and Ireland has been degraded, um, and it'd be easier to save it than to repair it,
Right.
which is a big problem going forward. But so we can't really save it anymore. But
Yeah.
we need to find a way to kind of balance it with the needs of the people. So that's kind of why it's becoming huge recently, which is why I have a job. Whereas 10 years ago, I wouldn't have this job. It wouldn't
Yeah. I
really
imagine
exist.
it's a area that's probably increased massively in the requirement to have it, and everything being so intent and looking at nature and the environmental effects of what we do. I imagine it's boomed, that industry.
Yeah, no, massively. Even so, the course I did, the wildlife biology course, it was like 4 years ago when people were graduating. You'd be you had to be top of the class to get a
Yeah.
job in consultancy, whereas now they are scrambling for people. They obviously they're not going to take people that can't do the job, but like no one that I know that applied for a job in consultancy didn't get one, because the
Right.
people that didn't apply, they it's just not the job they wanted and they wouldn't have been suitable.
Mm.
But yeah, everyone that wanted a job in consultancy got one because it's just such a booming market. You still don't
Mm.
get paid a lot, but it's a good job. Like you're half in the office, half out the office.
Yeah, if you're that way inclined to be out in the wild, then it's perfect, isn't it? And
Yeah,
yeah.
100%. You get to see a lot of places in the country that you live in as well, which is always I find interesting. You get to travel around.
Yeah, a bit of travel as well.
Yeah.
And you mentioned at the start, as you were talking, you said about there's very few true natural areas. Do you know where those are, and what constitutes a true natural area?
Yeah, so Amazon rainforest would be the big one. There are, and they're kind of, there was a term for them in college, like biodiversity hotspots, I think it was.
Hmm.
And then you also have biodiversity cold spots, but they can also be important. Just because they don't have a lot of life doesn't mean they're not unique and support unique species and habitats. But anyway, that's besides the point. But yeah, no, so the Amazon rainforest would be a big one. Arctic would
Yeah.
be another big one, although obviously melting away. And I mean, you do get them in the UK and Ireland. Like near where my grandparents live, we have one of the largest bog complexes in Europe left, and so that would be considered a native environment, like a natural native environment. And it is mostly intact. It has some human impact, which is why it's tough to maybe say it's purely natural.
Mm.
But again, it's this unique habitat that's kind of only kept in that area because of lack of human uh, like kind of use of it or
Mm.
settling of it in a way.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just there are some in the UK and Ireland, but they're just hard to come to.
Mm. And in your time working in the area, what sort of things have you worked on? So, what have you worked on already? What are you looking at working on in the future? Is there anything?
So my first job after I left college was the countryside survey, Northern Ireland countryside survey. It was just a baseline of what habitats and what species are around in Northern Ireland, and it's just to kind of track change over time, which I found very interesting because
Mm.
you're kind of helping build a database of the country and what's there. And then after that, it was less kind of pure science. It wasn't just data based. I got the job in the consultancy after that, and that's where we kind of work on the planning side of things for buildings and projects. And we do also do other stuff, but there's not as much work in, say, habitat surveys or species surveys. So the planning side of things would be like we had an example where we're going in for planning on a warehouse and to try and make sure that it was as beneficial to the local area as possible, we did a huge landscaping aspect to it where you bring in like a pond for a lot of the amphibians and well invertebrates as well, um, and then kind of clears like clean. It's also incorporated into the drainage, so it cleans the water before it leaves the site,
Hmm.
which yeah benefits people, not just the environment, because you've got to keep your water clean.
Yeah, for sure. And the work you did on Northern Ireland, looking at the habitats and the species, was there anything that you found during that you didn't know already? Was there anything that surprised you about that work?
Yeah. The big thing on that one, so in Northern Ireland, there's a big lake called Loch Ness, and it's the source of water for I think like maybe a third or more of the Northern Ireland population.
Hmm.
And it was the year, so this made headline news on that year. But the year I did that survey was the year it basically had an toxal algal bloom, and it was
Right.
just like you couldn't drink it. It stank like something had died inside of it, and so that was pretty shocking. That was an eye opener of like, and like there's so much material out on how it happened and why it happened, but it was just a accumulate. You couldn't point at one thing being like this happened and that made this water completely toxic.
Mm.
It was years of neglect and warm weather that year and farming practices and lack of kind of consultation with owners and no more monitoring of the water quality because of a bunch of issues with funding. So yeah, that was an eye opener of how bad things can be in the environmental sector.
Yeah, that's for sure an eye opener if you find that, and it's the source of that much water for that many people as well.
Yeah.
So you spoke about when you first went into it and how it was not as big as it is now, as in the area of work.
Mm.
What actually drew you to that then when you first considered it? Because obviously, like you say, it wasn't as big as it is now.
Yeah. I kind of fell into it. Probably a bit like yourself. Obviously, I know a bit of your story where after A levels, I was a bit like I didn't know what to do. Um,
Yeah.
I'd, I'd kind of purposely hadn't got into any university. I heard your episode not so long ago, and it was like you applied for two really hard college like
Yeah,
universities.
I chose two which had the same grades.
Yeah, I chose two which I knew I couldn't get into. It was like A star, A star A, and A star AA, and I was like, yeah, I'm not going into that. But instead of telling my parents I'm not going to go to university because I don't feel ready, I was just like, I just fail at doing it, and that'll
Okay.
solve my
Yeah.
problem. And then so yeah, I was a bit lost, and then I got a job working in a tree nursery as just a summer job, like it was temporary contract. I was there for like 3 4 months, and I had a great time. Really enjoyed
Hmm.
working outside, like being out in all weathers, which was a surprise to me because as a kid I hated being outside. I would always complain when my mum would take me on hikes, um, and so yeah, I just fell in love with being outside. But then I went and did a computer science degree for a year and a half after that summer, because I thought good money in computer science that will be
Yeah.
enough to make me happy. And nah,
Happiness is more than money, you found.
yeah, exactly. And then so I dropped out of that, and then my mum was like, "Oh, by the way, there's this course in Ireland called wildlife biology," and it sounded like a dream. It was like they would teach you how to be in any environment. Like there was meant to be like kayaking, boat handling courses, mountaineering, and all this kind of stuff, and then teach you the theoretical side of biology and wildlife. And so I was like, that sounds perfect, and went and did it, and I had a great time. Unfortunately, COVID kind of slowed my
Yeah.
time at college, but yeah, I had a great time. And then it was whilst at that degree, like whilst in the degree, lecturers would be like, "Oh, by the way, this is the most likely job you're going to have, consultancy,
Yeah.
and this is what it entails." And I was like, "Yeah, sounds great," because like that purist side of science, where you're out in the field every day, like and then crunching the numbers, is like amazing, sounds amazing. You get to see all these amazing things, meet amazing people, but the stability of it is like you have to be seriously smart to kind of make a go of it. And I
Yeah.
was like, I'm not that level of intelligent. So I was just like, this sounds perfect. Like security, but also get to be outside, be in touch with nature, but then also like be learning how to kind of operate in an office if I ever want to settle down in an office.
And you're that's the natural progression from that degree. Then people tend to go into that role.
Yeah,
It complements it quite well, does it? Yeah.
yeah, 100%. If there's anyone listening here in Ireland, which I don't know, uh, yeah, 100%. If you think you might want to get into a job that is mainly outside, then wildlife biology is the way to go because they prepare you like no one else. Like you can have people that go to the high-end universities in Ireland, and they will do like botany, zoology, all these very specific sciences that should prepare them to be specialists in consultancy. They don't come out half as prepared as you because they're just not in the field. They don't do any
Mm.
field work, whereas we do field work.
Yeah, that's the key, isn't it? Getting hands on with it as well, because you can read about stuff, listen to things, try and take it all in, but until you get hands on with it and see it firsthand in the field, that's where you're gonna. And that relates to everything in life, really. Is it's
Yeah,
just experience, isn't it? It's experience. So,
yeah,
and you've spoken about being in Ireland.
mm,
You weren't always in Ireland.
no,
You used to be in England
yeah,
with myself.
yeah,
At age 22, you moved from London to rural Ireland. So it's a big change. So you went
yeah.
from one of the biggest cities in the world to a place where you had to drive however many miles to get to your only shop. So
Yeah.
what was that like for you, that change?
It was yeah, it was a good initial change. Like I got very lucky. I met some people who were very like they kind of got me into the swing of being in Ireland very quickly. Like there's a big history between England and Ireland. Luckily I have Irish heritage, which kind of eases the blow, but
Yeah.
like if you don't have thick skin, you can't move to Ireland if you're English. That's all I'm going to say. And you got to take it on the chin. Like most of it's joking, and like it's just if someone's not taking the piss out of you in Ireland, it means they don't like you. So I got very lucky. I got a crash course on how to interact with Irish people from a group that I've met when I first came over.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, it was a bit of a change. Like yeah, in London, everything's at your fingertips. You public transport is unbelievable. I know it gets grief, but it is
Yeah,
unbelievable. Like
100%.
it's so good. And yeah, so and it's like obviously I can, well not obviously, but I can drive, and is a requirement to live where I live in Ireland, or lived in Ireland. Like because yeah, like it's like 15 kilometers to my nearest shop,
Mm.
and it's not a flat road. It would take you 2 hours to walk it to the nearest shop and then 2 hours back. And
It's a long way for some milk.
exactly, yeah. Yeah, and there's no like local corner shop. Like that is the local corner shop. And so that yeah, that was a bit of an eye opener, but it's just a thing of like preparing and like kind of planning. You just like there's no popping to the shop. So like me and mum, we would just haul as much as we could to the house on that shop, and then just that was it. If you didn't want to move, you just made do with what you had. So if you ran out of chicken, you don't have chicken, you have fish or
Yeah.
whatever. And so yeah, but it was also like a nice change of pace. Like it's so quiet out where my mum lives. Like you sleep like a baby. Like it's unbelievable. It's like I felt like years of stress from living in London just kind of disappeared, and like I was so well rested. Like you'd wake up at like I was always a late bird in London. I'd get up at 8 and be like, God, this is a struggle to get to school or whatever. Whereas in Ireland, you wake up when the sun gets up, which in the summer is like 4 a.m. and you're like, God, I feel amazing. I feel
Mm.
as fresh as anything. So that was nice. There is also like it forces you to kind of come out of your shell, I guess, when you move country. You don't
Like a
have
fresh
friend,
start.
yeah, you don't have friends to rely on to bring you to stuff. You just have to go to stuff and hope that you make friends. So I got pretty good. Like a guy at work recently described me as a person that if I was left with a room with someone, that I'd come away knowing their life story, which I was like, that is not me. Like I am not a chatty person. But that's just what I've become over time
That's what
because
people see you as.
yeah, just because I ask questions because I'm just like, well, like yeah, it's just what you do when you meet people. You just go like, oh, so what do you do? Where do you live? What's your
Yeah.
hobby? Are you good at your hobby? Like, what's the crack, basically?
I think that's something that people really underestimate is that conversations are just asking questions. It's obviously it's a back and forth of asking questions essentially,
Yeah,
but people will think highly of you. And this is something that Terry in episode 15 spoke about was he was saying that he has this game where he goes when he's meeting new people that his wife knew, he would say, right, I'm going to go in, I'm going to find out everything about them. And tomorrow at work, they're going to tell you that I'm a great guy. They won't be able to tell you why, but they just will.
yeah,
And he'd go in, he'd learn everything about them. He'd come home that night and he'd say, yep, she's got like husband, 4 kids, one divorce, whatever.
mm,
And the next day at work, she'd go in and they'd be like, wow, your husband's a really great guy. And she'd be like, yeah, why is that? And they
yeah,
just wouldn't be able to say.
yeah,
And that just really, yeah, reminds me of what you're saying there is it's just talking to people and asking questions. And that's doing that. People will just, people love to talk about themselves.
yeah,
Everyone
100%.
loves to talk about themselves.
Yeah,
Trying to stop yourself talking about yourself is the harder thing to do.
yeah,
And when you do that, like you did when you moved, you get that sort of response.
yeah. No, yeah, I think so. And also with, I think you mentioned it in a previous episode. I can't remember which one, but it was like people are interesting, and like that's something I developed uh, whilst I was in Ireland because you hear some wacky stories and you're just like, how did you get in that situation? I need to know. Like,
Yeah,
how did this happen? And how did you come to be? Or, yeah, you look at a person and you're like, you are the weirdest amalgamation of different parts of things. Like, how have you come to be? Like, I lived with a guy who looked like your typical, like, sports player. Like, he was, like, you'd be like, he is a lad. Like, he will sink 10 pints and then like be like say something inappropriate and then go play football like and
yeah,
he'd be fine whatever. He didn't play any sports. He just went to the gym and he was the biggest hippie I've ever seen in my life. And I was just like, how like dude, how is
yeah.
where has this come from? And like no one else in his family was like that. Like his brother was fully into GA, which is like the Irish like sports. And yeah, I was just like, you baffle me, but I love it. I need to know more. And
Tell me everything.
yeah, yeah. And
Yeah,
he's a funny guy. He's one of the funniest people I've ever met. But yeah,
yeah, 100%. That's a theme that's been running through the first 20 or 21 episodes. Is that people are amazing and people are interesting. So
yeah,
just talking to people, uh, any point you can, just ask people questions. You don't need a camera, you don't need a microphone. Just ask questions, and you will learn some incredible things about people.
yeah,
So, talk to me a bit about what it was like for you. Obviously, you just moved over and you were
mm,
studying as well. So you're trying to learn the new land. That
yeah,
you've just sort of explained how that was for you, but you're also trying to balance that with studying and studying well because you're enjoying it. So
yeah.
how was that for you?
The studying was actually probably the easiest part. I feel like so I was a little bit older. Like I just missed the classification of a mature student because I hadn't turned 23 the
Is it
January
only
of
23? Wow.
yeah, it's only 23, but it has to be the January of the year you're entering. So not even like the
Right.
January
So you
after, you'd
start in
have to,
September.
yeah, you have to
Yeah.
already. So if you were 23 in the February, you wouldn't be a mature student, even though you're joining in September. Um, so yeah, I went in at 22, and like that little bit of extra maturity, like I was still like able to go out and drink and go to lectures, and I was young enough to cope with it. But like I didn't have that thing of I'm not I'm here just because I feel like I have to be. Like I've chosen to be here. I'm going to be fully engaged, and so I would always ask questions. I think lectures got sick of me after a while. I think my own
Mhm.
classmates got sick of me after a while. but like I was just there asking questions, and eventually people were like, "Actually, you do ask good questions," and I was like, "Thanks, thanks for
Mm.
that. Maybe you should try it." But yeah, so that the studying part was good. The new land again, because like yeah, so I got settled where my mum lives in County Mayo, and then I studied in County Kerry, and so I had to meet a whole new group of people, and that was fine. Like got to know people um, pretty quickly. But I think I find like when you're a bit older and you move, you kind of like you will always maybe be a little bit on the outside looking in, unless you're like two people in a similar situation and you bond like because you're both new. But like there was people there that like Ireland's a very small place. Like these people knew each other from like all new mutual friends, and they would just bond through that, or like have been like maybe their clubs had played each other or towns had played each other.
Mm.
Um, and so yeah, as an Englishman kind of coming in, it was yeah, like like people were nice to me. I was settling in. I was invited to stuff, but you still feel like you're just a bit like disconnected from the culture and the people, and you just feel like you're kind of the outside looking in, which I still get today. Like I've moved again to Dublin, and it's just like you can't replicate decades of friendship just because you're
Yeah.
chatty. So, like, I will always feel like I'm maybe a pace off, but it shouldn't stop people from moving. I think it's a great challenge, and then you always have home to go back to. Well, hopefully, you always have home to go back to. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, no, it's a great challenge. But yeah, it is. There are parts of it where you're like, maybe it wouldn't be what I pick.
Yeah. I think where you get those cultural like nuances that only people get who have grown up in that area and that life, they get these like little inside jokes or
Yeah, exactly.
these things that you
Yeah,
might just reference in the same way we would
yeah,
if people came to England, and
yeah.
it just is what it is.
Yeah, like
But
cultural moments. Like I've seen
yeah,
a lot of the cultural shows that are now like prevalent in Ireland, things like Hardy Bucks and Father Ted and whatever. But yeah, it's not the same as like living and breathing the culture for like
mm,
they have inside jokes that go back decades, and you can't
mm,
just rock up and be like, yeah, I get it, guys, I'm in.
yeah. The fact you hadn't seen Father Ted before you went to Ireland makes me sad.
I know, yeah. But
um, so I want to talk about your other degree. So you mentioned it a bit earlier, just the computer science degree.
yeah,
So you started that whilst you were in England,
hmm
um, but you did decide to stop studying that after 18 months. So that's
yeah,
obviously a year and a bit of studying. What led to that decision for you?
definitely like mental health played a huge part of it. I'd kind of like made it seem like it was my last option because yeah, didn't get into the universities after A level. That was my own fault, whatever. And then went into training, picked up a job that was just like working in a hotel, whatever. And I was like, I need to do something. And like I'm getting like, and like with like I'm very lucky in the life I've lived and the family that I've had and like where I've come from and the stability I've had. So it's like I'm wasting a golden ticket here. Is kind of how was my mindset. So then, yeah, so when I picked computer science, like I did do some coding prior to the course, and I was like, yeah, I quite like the puzzle solving aspect and like the way it all works. I kind of got it a little bit,
Mm,
um, and so I was like, yeah, I'll give it a go. And so in my head, I was like, this is it. This is the big one. You got to knuckle down and do it. And then once I got into it, I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I was just like, nah. And so it's that thing of like, you think you're going to be more resilient than you are with something. And you're like, so I was kind of looking at myself being like, how can you not bring yourself to do it? Like you've said you're going to do it, just do it. And
yeah.
I was just spiraling into like self-worth issues and just not a great time. And so eventually I was just like, right, just give it up because you're just making yourself miserable.
Mm,
And then, yeah, when they changed to wildlife biology, it was the easiest thing in the world to study and actually do
mm.
it because it's what I wanted to do. Sometimes you fool yourself into thinking you want to do something that you don't want to do.
Yeah, 100%. And people fall into things and to do what you did and to accept that that wasn't what you actually enjoyed and you weren't it wasn't fulfilling you at that time,
mm,
to actually say no, this isn't where I'm going, I'm going to stop now halfway through. Like, a lot of people would have probably just carried on, got a degree, and gone into whatever was next, whereas you've taken a big decision to completely 180.
yeah,
And also on the other side of it, you starting your other degree, you have an experience behind you and you know what not enjoying something feels like. So
yeah, that's true.
when you start to do the new one and you feel, yeah, this is much better, I'm enjoying this,
Mm,
you actually have some experience of the opposite. So
yeah, I actually got a random like nugget of advice from like when I was doing the computer science degree. I went to one of the guys' houses,
yeah.
and his I met his granny. They were having a big family dinner. I barely knew this guy like 3 weeks, and he invited me back to his house for like a big family dinner. And I was like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then his granny, who everyone made out to be like this super scary matriarch, just loved me for no reason. And she was asking me like what I was doing, and I was like this, that, the other, and computer science is what I found landed on now, but I'm not sure I like it. And every like the guy, her grandson that I was friends with, he was like, she's gonna like slag you for not being committed to it. She just was like, at least you're ruling things out that you don't want to do. Like that's better than nothing. And I was like, cheers, thanks for that.
Yeah. I think with life, I think you only get there's so few things you can actually try. So every time you try something, the chances of it being what you want to do and what you are going to spend more time doing is so slim. So you're just trying things to rule them out, essentially.
Yeah,
You're almost working in reverse, but you
yeah,
know the general idea, you know you as a person, so you can narrow it down a bit. But if you try something you don't enjoy it, you should 100% be honest with yourself
yeah,
and make that very difficult decision.
yeah. But it's easier in the long run. I'll tell you that much.
Yeah. And at that time when you made that decision, was there any self doubt in your mind? Did you know where you were going to go forward from that? Did you have a plan in place?
No, I didn't have a single plan other than go to Ireland and go to my mum's house for the summer.
Mm.
And that, yeah, that was because like I think my mum could tell that I was struggling a bit, and so she was basically just like, come to Ireland, relax, chill, and then never really looked back from it. Then I came back to the UK for like one summer after that, and then moved to Ireland permanently from then on. And it was just, but yeah, didn't have a plan, but it was just like anything other than this. And
Mm.
realistically, like I was only 23, 20, no, sorry, 21. Yeah, I got my colleges mixed up. 21 when I left. So it's like, doesn't fucking make a difference. Like you're gonna be fine. Just keep
Mm.
going.
Outside of education, you, again, since you've gone to Ireland, you've definitely picked up a lot more sports. I would say, like, we played football together
Mhm.
when you were here.
Yeah,
Um, but you've taken up a few more sports, and one that sort of stuck with you, I would say, is climbing and bouldering.
yeah.
How was your experience of that sport been for you?
It's been brilliant. I think like I did it once when I was like 10, 11, and like I think secretly I probably had the bug back then, but I just wasn't much of a go-getter when I was younger, so I kind of just put it on the back burner until I got a bit older. But no, yeah, it's unbelievable. It's very good for your mental health. Like you're just problem solving. Like I'll zone out when in between climbs. I'll just be like, just sit on the mat and just be at peace whilst I rest, and then obviously start thinking about what I'm going to do afterwards. When I'm ready to try again. And then the biggest challenge though was like always as a kid I was terrified of heights.
Yeah.
Um, my dad still gets wobbly standing on chairs, so maybe I got it off him. But like I had that where if I stood on a chair, I still don't feel great standing on chairs, to be honest, actually. But
But climbing walls is all right.
yeah, yeah, you can hold on to things. Chairs haven't got handholds, Sam. It's just feet. And yeah, so I'm still scared of heights, but like it's helped me like learn to control my fear, maybe. Especially when I did like outdoor rope climbing and like a course where you had to like abseil yourself. because like usually if I'm abseiling, it'll be like someone is there's a fail safe of someone else is like really like lowering you. You're just choosing the pace.
Mm.
And we did a bit where it was just you. It was like if you mess up the sequence, which obviously not a hard sequence, but if you do mess it up, you die or injure yourself quite severely. And I just remember leaning back over this cliff face, and I was just like panicking. Like I don't think I've ever been that scared in my life. Because yeah, that lean back, even experienced abseilers, I think, get a bit shaky on the lean back.
Yeah,
But
going out
yeah,
over an edge is quite.
yeah, and I just remember like it's the first time where I've managed to push through and like control my breathing and like just be like kind of get rid of that overwhelming fear and just make it fear, where it's like you can still function. Like I'm still afraid, but I can still function, and like you don't get that like jankiness of if you're too scared and you start losing kind of fluidity in your movements. Like I got rid of that, and I was like, fuck yeah. And that was a huge
Like controlled
confidence.
fear.
Yeah, it was a huge confidence boost because it's like, oh, I can face my fears, and that might have also helped with like maybe becoming more confident because I used to be scared of talking to people, but now I'm fine.
Yeah. Well, the community side of that climbing and bouldering is really good as well. It's another, we've climbed together, and when you're trying to figure out, like you said again, about the problem solving side of it, and that's something that's fascinating because you're stood there, you're trying to plan the route, you're trying to visualize the route before you climb it. You climb it, you fail at a certain aspect, you keep trying, you might keep failing at the same bit.
Mm,
And as you're trying to work it out, people will just come over to you. And if they've done it before, if they're working on it as well, you sort of start working together.
yeah, yeah,
And there's not even necessarily an introduction. It's
no,
just straight
straight into
into
it.
being
Yeah,
helpful to each other. And it's a really nice way that sort of, yeah, stood out to me when I climbed. But yeah, definitely the mental health aspect of it as well. The mental, you can't think about things when you're
no,
hanging off a wall
no,
with just your grip strength
yeah,
to go.
yeah,
All you can think about is the next move.
yeah,
But yeah, I mean, it's a great sport.
yeah,
Going over what we've sort of spoken about, so looking back over everything we've spoken about, the differences, your journeys, moving abroad, the difficulties that you overcame doing that. If you could go back in time to the start,
yeah,
you can't give yourself advice that's going to necessarily change the outcome.
yeah.
Um, but if you could whisper something in the ear just to help them on their way,
Mm.
young Matt, you can just whisper something in his ear just to make him feel a little bit better about himself, or a bit of guidance. What would that be?
I'd say the biggest thing would just be that like there's plenty of time. Um, like so that was the big thing of like the biggest struggle I had was feeling like I'd wasted my opportunities as like the golden opportunity I'd been given at life. And it was just like I felt like I wasted it. And it's like you still have time to turn it around, do something you love, and kind of just crack on and make a bunch of new friends, experience so many new things, like fall in love with another country. Like I do love Ireland. I know I
Mm,
said a few negative things earlier, but like it's unbelievable country. The people are amazing. The scenery is amazing. The weather is terrible, but that's besides the
that's
point.
standards.
It makes you appreciate
Yeah,
the good
UK and
days.
Ireland.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate the good days even more because like a sunny day in Ireland is worth 100 elsewhere. I'm telling you.
Mm,
But it's yeah, no, there's plenty of time. Just don't panic, I guess, would be the major advice.
I like that. I like
Yeah,
that. I think people forget that we do have time on our side, and especially if you look at the retirement age is
getting
like
later.
65 odd now.
Yeah,
Is when you're 20, it feels like every decision you make is the be all and end all.
yeah,
But you've got over 40 years to go
yeah,
until you retire. So
yeah,
the chances of you sitting in a job for that long are almost non existent. So
yeah,
try new things, enjoy things, dislike things, learn from it,
yeah,
and keep moving forward.
yeah, 100%. and you can always
Agree.
retrain when you're older. Everyone does it.
Exactly. Exactly. Matt, I think that's a lovely place to end today. So I want to thank you again for coming on.
Thanks.
For anyone that would like to keep up to date with what we're doing on the podcast and see the guests that we're getting on, you can follow us on Instagram at Lonely Chapter Podcast and also on X at lonely_chapter. If you enjoyed the episode, please do share it with someone who you may think would enjoy it as well. If you haven't already rated the show, if you could do that as well, that really helps. Lastly, from me, thank you for listening.